Loneliness. It's more than just being alone. It's an emotional experience, a sense of something missing in the connections we have or crave. High school is an especially difficult time of our lives, and for young people especially, loneliness is strikingly common. It comes in many forms: feeling isolated in a crowd, misunderstood, or alienated by social media's perfect facades. Sometimes it's fleeting, like having to spend a Friday night alone. Other times, it's a deep, persistent ache, a search for belonging. Loneliness is universal, but even in our solitude, poetry might make us feel less alone. I hope this helps. A Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. It's no secret that loneliness is an overwhelming feeling, and that oftentimes we can feel as helpless as a noiseless, patient spider in a vast world. This poem by Walt Whitman uses vivid imagery to depict a spider spinning its web as a metaphor for a soul seeking connections. Just as the spider launched forth filament, 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 our souls are ceaselessly venturing to find meaning. Ultimately, the poem suggests that in spite of the loneliness we might experience, the work of the soul is to constantly seek and make connections, however daunting such a task may be. It reminds us to persevere through the temporary pangs of isolation, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, O my soul. Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. Sometimes it's the sense that we are fundamentally different from those around us that makes us feel so alone. Maybe we feel flawed, broken, or too different to ever fit in or feel connected. During our darkest moments, we may feel that our past, our childhood, and our upbringings have doomed us to loneliness. Alone by Edgar Allan Poe uses a somber tone, fragmented syntax, and natural imagery to explore the poet's feelings of loneliness and disconnection from an early age. He describes his stormy life and childhood as the mystery which binds him to solitude, saying, "All I loved alone." This poem offers at once an indulgence into our own hopelessness and also solace. On one hand, the poem reads like a lamentation, fitting in with the gothic darkness that is a hallmark of Poe's work, and which gives you space to wallow a bit in your own sadness. However, I encourage you to also find solace through this poem. While Poe regrets that the flaws that make him feel so separate from the rest of the world, it's ultimately these traits that make him who he is, the poet we so celebrate today. For you too, the things that you lament about yourself are ultimately what make you who you are. Bryant Park at Dusk by Geoffrey Brock. Bryant Park at Dusk is a contemplative poem where the speaker grapples with their thoughts and feelings during a moment of solitude amidst the communal setting of Bryant Park, juxtaposed against the bustling backdrop of New York City. We all live in Toronto, a big city where we're constantly surrounded by people. This experience of urban loneliness, feeling alone despite being surrounded by others, can make us feel all the worse. If you've ever felt alone in a crowded place, this poem is for you. Maybe you have lots of friends and family, but you still feel a pang of temporary loneliness. Maybe you're alone on a Friday night, not left out per se, but you'd really rather be in company. This poem makes space for that. The line, "I'm alone in a crowd, e pluribus pluris," captures the feeling perfectly. Brock cleverly inverts the traditional motto of the United States, e pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. Instead, he says, out of many, many, showcasing the disconnection he feels from his surroundings. It also gives a positive take on loneliness, showing that we can find beauty in solitude, find connection in our fast-paced, impersonal world, and that familiarity with being alone can be a beautiful thing. We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Loneliness can sometimes surface when we feel that we're masquerading as someone we're not, which can be all too common throughout high school when you're trying to fit in while finding yourself. Masks can offer relief from the burden of being seen. To refuse scrutiny is to dodge the possibility of rejection after all, but also the possibility of acceptance and connection. We Wear the Mask uses a rich metaphor to describe the way that we put on and accept the presence of masks in society to hide our true emotions behind a facade. This has definitely been exacerbated by social media, always seeing the highlight reels of other people's lives and never the struggles. The poem serves as a societal critique, sarcastically positing why the world should ever be overwise to question what's happening behind the masks. When considered in its historical context of post-Civil War oppression of African Americans, the poem highlights that the call to remove our masks has even large and more urgent societal implications. Sanctuary by Jean Valentine. The poem Sanctuary portrays a fragmented inner dialogue where the speaker grapples with questions about connection, fear, and death, which ultimately culminate in something of an answer to the paradox of solitude. We all hate the feeling of loneliness, but in some way, are we not responsible for the disconnection we feel from the rest of the world? Within the self, we find comfort and security, a sanctuary away from the scrutiny and judgment of the rest of the world. As the speaker puts it, a house out of our own words. Yet, we also fear the disconnection it brings. So, how do we grapple with this paradox? With choppy syntax like ellipses and em dashes, the speaker highlights the divide they feel between themselves and others. They wrestle with their conflicting desires and fears. On one hand, wanting solitude and silence, and on the other, wanting friendship and talk. The poem culminates in an answer to the speaker's questions, which ultimately dares us to venture out of our own shells, to embrace the discomfort of exposing ourselves to the world, and to understand that the true fear is to die never having lived at all, never having listened or connected to others. We're left with a final bittersweet reflection on this lifelong struggle, a simple phrase that encapsulates the complexities of loneliness and ties together all these notions from all of these poems perfectly. Impossible, sometimes. Loneliness is a universal experience. I know I felt it a lot throughout high school, and I'll continue to feel it for the rest of my life. It's just a hallmark of being human. But it's not all bad. It can lead you to self-discovery, connection, and the courage to live more authentically. I hope these poems remind you that while loneliness may feel impossible sometimes, we're never truly alone in experiencing it.